Hi, I'm Alexandra, and I'm a bibliophile. Welcome to A Lovely Jaunt, where we talk about literature. Today I'm going to be talking about Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell. In this third episode, we're going to talk about power and siblings. Last week we left off comparing Mr. and Mrs. Gibson and Squire Hamley, and we looked at the way that their parenting is analyzed throughout the novel. And I'm going to pick up with Squire Hamley again, but this time we're going to compare him to Lady Harriet. To continue with the pairs, I actually also want to contrast Squire Hamley and Lady Harriet. Now, Lady Harriet is from the Cumnor family. She's one of the daughters of that family. And both of these characters are characters with power from the noblest families and the noblest lines in the neighborhood. One bears that power knowingly, that's Lady Harriet, and Squire Hamley, he kind of wields his power unknowingly. He doesn't understand the effects and the consequences of his behavior on those around him and truly how powerful he is. We can see Lady Harriet's conscious and appropriate management of her power and influence, mostly she steps into the plot to resolve problems in the novel for characters who are more powerless, like Molly, when her reputation is on the line. Lady Harriet kind of confronts that problem. She sees and comes to understand what the true situation is, and she doesn't save Molly by combating the rumors, but merely by using her influence. She takes Molly on a shopping trip, and then Molly's reputation is saved. So Lady Harriet understands how to move through this polite society and to manipulate it and use it in the best way, and use her power in the best way. Squire Hamley, on the other hand, he doesn't realize the amount of power that he has and the effect that he has on those around him. And this is clear through his relationship with his sons. And it's something that he comes to regret as he later in the novel realizes, oh, I really shouldn't have spoken so intemperately to my sons. I really shouldn't have said those things about the French, and I shouldn't have expressed myself so strongly, because his position already has a lot of power and influence in it. So he faces a lot of unintended consequences and broken relationships as a result of the way that he wields his power. We have to also, because the book does consistently contrast and compare Osborne and Gibson. And this is done pretty vocally in the novel, and it's done vocally by the parents. They're both the sons, the Hamley sons. As mentioned, Osborne is the older. And this type of parenting is shown to be problematic, and the parents regret it as they come to see the consequences of their choice to constantly compare their two sons to each other. Each lives under the heavy expectations put on them by this vocal comparison of their parents. Osborne is elegant, he's a poet, he's romantic, and as the elder son, he's kind of held up as this exemplar of elegant nobility, and they're really proud of him and want him to step into that role and bring honor to the Hamley name. They expect him to do really well at Oxford, which he does not do. And by contrast, Roger is very down-to-earth, robust. He's a naturalist. He's interested in science, which is not, part of the classical education really at this time. The biological sciences are really only beginning to be explored and understood in a formal way. So you might say that he's a man before his time, but he's definitely not appreciated by his family to be sort of at the same level in terms of what he can do for the family in the way that Osborne can. And ironically, Gibson, with his scientific mind, does very well at school, and that puts a little bit of tension between the brothers, but they have a really great relationship and they love each other deeply, and their love for each other overcomes that obstacle. And then finally, and probably most importantly, we need to contrast Molly and Cynthia, the two daughters. And again, we see them as products of their parenting. We see them as having the values and expressing the values of their parents. Molly more strongly because she's more close to her father, and Cynthia, though she continues some of the values of being admired for her looks and her vanity and being charming. She is a little bit more intelligent than her mom, and she has distance from her mom, so she is able to kind of understand that these are not the greatest things in life. You get a sense of in Cynthia's character that while she's aware of the fact of who she is, she's aware that her values are a little bit off, she almost can't help herself. She wishes she were a deeper person, and perhaps as stable and earnest and sincere as Molly is, as good as Molly is, but she doesn't know how to be better than who she is right now. Cynthia is more shallow, lighthearted, clever, but not interested in deep learning. Molly is very intelligent, interested in deep learning, but she's not very savvy. So the nuances of society, which Cynthia kind of glides through in all of these polite social circles, and is charming and winsome in all of them. Molly doesn't quite have that ability, and so Cynthia does that almost by instinct. So her intelligence in that area is very high, that social intelligence. Molly is the kind of character who, if she might be annoyingly good. Somehow she avoided that for me because I tend to be sensitive to characters who are like that. I think Gaskell, she really didn't put a kind of redeeming fault in Molly's character. She's just so good throughout, but I'm not mad at her for it, and I'm not annoyed by it, which, like I said, that's usually a character I tend to get annoyed by. And on the contrasting side, Cynthia is very likable despite her faults and despite her shallowness. She has a very sincere love for Molly, and we come to love her for loving Molly, in a sense. One thing that's also really interesting is while Roger and Osborne are contrasted in the eyes of their parents, Molly and Cynthia are contrasted in the eyes of almost all of the other characters in the book. So we know that who prefers which of the girls. There's kind of like a Team Molly or a Team Cynthia thing going on. Lady Harriet and Squire Hamley both prefer Molly and her honest and earnest ways. Mr. Kirkpatrick, he's a kind of a side character. He's the brother of Mrs. Gibson's first husband. So remember, she was Mrs. Kirkpatrick at one time, Cynthia Kirkpatrick. He's a successful London lawyer. We know that he's a little bit more fashionable, and he prefers Cynthia's charm and elegance. All of the young suitors prefer Cynthia because she's beautiful and sweet and elegant and charming. And despite this contrast and varying preferences given for one or the other, which, both girls seem to be somewhat aware of, especially Cynthia, she's very sensitive to that sort of thing. Despite this, they have a pretty great relationship. And the relationship isn't even strained when Roger, who Molly so very clearly loves, Molly doesn't realize this herself yet. Roger at first falls in love with Cynthia. And even under this tension of the love triangle, their relationship isn't strained. And even when it's clear that Cynthia doesn't love and appreciate Roger in the way that he deserves to be, this still doesn't put their relationship under tension. What puts their relationship under tension is something that I find really, really interesting. It's that Cynthia wants to be admired for her appearance more than loved for who she actually is, warts and all. So one thing that is interesting about Cynthia, and she loves Molly back to the best of her ability, but she doesn't have a real great depth of love. And in this way, she reminds me a bit of Estella from Great Expectations. There's that great scene where Miss Havisham kind of wants love back from Estella, and Estella's like, I don't know how to love you back. You're the one who trained me how to be a cold person. Likewise, we see a bit of that in Cynthia, where it's like when she was in those formative years where she really needed the love and support of her mom was absent, was hanging out with wealthy families who could give her a more luxurious vacation. And so Cynthia didn't develop that depth when she needed to. So again, the relationship comes under tension when Molly becomes aware of a secret that Cynthia has that doesn't show Cynthia in the most flattering light. So Molly begins to see some of the flaws that Cynthia would like to hide about herself because she feels that she couldn't be admired for, in the way that she wants to be once someone knows it about her. Of course, Molly loves her unconditionally. She loves her for who she is, not for what she's done. But that's not the kind of love that Cynthia is interested in or really capable of receiving. Let's keep the conversation going. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Until next time, I'm Alexandra, and I'm still a bibliophile.